Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session on AI and law tech, preparing your firm for the future. I'm Liz Rosser, Executive Director of Operations and Resources at the SRA. So we ran this session a couple of weeks ago at our face-to-face conference, and we had great interest. It was packed out, and it's a real pleasure to get the opportunity to rerun this session as a virtual audience. So the way this is going to work is we're going to shortly play a recorded segment, which is from the physical conference, and that will be around 25 minutes long. Following on from that, we've reconvened our expert panel with a bit of a tweak, which I'll explain when we get there. And they're here to answer questions from you, our virtual live audience. So to submit a question, you should be able to see a link underneath this video. So simply type your question there. Please don't be shy. By all means, start submitting questions straight away. We'll collect them together and I'll be able to ask them when we join. So I will see you shortly. We're recording this, so a special welcome to anyone who's watching this online during our virtual conference. But before we start, I'd just like to introduce you to our panel. I think we're really blessed with some expert panelists here, so I'm sure you'll have lots to take away with you after this session. So on my far right, on your far left, Aislinn O'Connell is the Head of Innovation Policy at the SRA. But I'm also delighted to welcome two external speakers to this session who've both got a huge amount to contribute. Next to me here is Paul Saunders. Paul is a solicitor and MD of Legal Eye and part of PEXA. So that's a world-leading digital property exchange and data insights business. So he's got extensive experience in compliance, in risk management and in conveyancing, which does make him a key person both in this field and in the profession, but with lots of expertise to add. And then between Aislinn and Paul, we've got Tony. Tony Randall is a partner and head of client tech and service improvements. That's a good one. Client tech and service improvements at Shoesmiths.
Title changes every year.
Does it? Yeah, it's quite a challenge there. But with extensive experience in legal innovation, Tony has been instrumental in integrating advanced technologies into legal practice, enhancing efficiency and client service. So a lot of expertise, as I say. Full biogs are available on the conference app. I hope you found the conference app. But let's start with an important question and perhaps the crux of where we are today. So what changes have we seen in AI in the past year that has shifted the legal service landscape for regulators, for firms, and of course for consumers? Perhaps I'll start with you, Aislinn, and then move along if that's all right. So changes in the last year in AI and tech.
So I think from a consumer point of view in particular, it's been the increasing availability of AI, generative AI in particular. I think it's a rare day that you open your news app or your newspaper and don't read something about AI, about the wonders of ChatGPT or similar large language models, or indeed the pitfalls of it. So I think there's been a real increase in availability for real-life consumers in using AI. I don't think any of us in the room could ignore the fact that it's very likely that regular people are increasingly asking tools like that for legal advice or asking them to summarise different things or tell them what their legal options are. So I'd say from a consumer's point of view, it's been the huge just increase in its availability. And then from a regulator's point of view, I think for legal services in particular, we're increasingly getting questions that really centre around our boundary. So what is the boundary of legal services regulation when it comes to AI and when it comes to use of tech? How do professionals ensure that they are delivering good services, maintaining trust and confidence in the profession, but navigating a huge market with various providers? So from a regulatory point of view, we increasingly get questions that seem like, what provider should we use? And business advice type questions, as well as us coming up against challenges around what does it mean when we don't regulate the technology, but how do we build trust and confidence amongst our profession?
And Tony, perhaps a firm perspective.
Yeah, well, similarly to Aislinn, I think the accessibility of AI, everyone on the planet has access to AI, and that access is easy through public platforms and it's free of charge. Through public platforms. And from the firm's perspective, the issue is that it's entirely possible that there is a member of staff from every single firm represented in this audience who is currently accessing a public AI platform to undertake some of their work. And that is a worry. That's created new risks for us. That's created data protection risks, client confidentiality risks. The firm's own proprietary confidential information is at risk, and of course there's a risk of professional negligence because you can't trust what the AI says. So all those new risks have been created. The good news is that they can all be mitigated, so you can turn the frown upside down, and we can talk no doubt about some of the practical ways of doing that. One other observation, I spoke at this conference on this stage 3 years ago on exactly the same subject, and then I think there were about 40 people in the audience. And I think the size of the audience today is a measure of how it is now very close to the top, if not top, of most law firms' agendas.
Yeah, even in the last year, I mean, things have moved so rapidly in terms of, you know, even what you see, as you said, Aisling, about scaremongering and things in the press. You know, a year ago or 2 years ago, we were reading it and not really sure. Now everyone is using it, and even if you're not using it, your clients are using it, or as you say, someone in your firm is. So the pace of change over the last year, I think, has been incredible. But Paul, what are you seeing?
I think just to build on Tony's point, what I think is really interesting is that ChatGPT only came out in November 22. So I don't think you can talk about 12-month periods at the moment. I think that change is incredible. But what is fascinating, and again, thinking about going back 2 years or 12 months, there was research out that suggested that around 50 to 60% of us that sat in the scepticism pot, and that we were really, really unsure about it. In 24, that has dropped down to 24%. And actually what has increased is the experimental side of it. So it's actually firms looking at it and utilising it in a small way. And it's actually that learning process that we all need to go through. And it's the same with anything that we've had, even when email was introduced or when any other form of tech was introduced for us. Actually, there's an initial period where we do run very scared from it, and we get absolutely bombarded by product. But actually, it's trying to identify the places where it's used very simply, and we can actually test it really safely within our organisations. I think the biggest change for me is that approach. We're now actually thinking about it and experimenting with it. I think that's a really positive side.
Aisling, you talked a little bit about regulation and that people are asking sort of what products and things, but what are you seeing particular issues and challenges that small firms are facing, the small firms that you engage with around this?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that my team, the innovation team, SRA Innovate, we're at Stand For, and we're really keen to hear directly from all of you. So if you would like to kind of come and share your experiences with us, please do. We spend a lot of time engaging with our regulated community and with other stakeholders, and that includes small firms. So some of the things that we tend to hear and kind of questions and concerns that we hear about, one is around data in particular. I think everyone recognises that AI and generative AI in particular really relies on good quality data, and the more bespoke and more real that you can input into those language models, the better the output is and the better quality tool that you get. We get a lot of questions around client data in particular, how firms can look at training large language models in-house, for example, whether they can even do that, whether that is a breach of client confidentiality, and lots of questions around that. And we would say our kind of, I suppose, primary position is always pointing people to our existing resources. So we have some really helpful stuff out there, like our Risk Outlook report on AI that does exactly that. It talks about, if you're thinking about using AI, think about these things. You need to think about your data protection, and you need to look at the ICO's website and all of their resources, which are really, really helpful and up-to-date and implementable. Other questions that we get asked a lot is around kind of quality of provider. So we often get asked if we can recommend particular suppliers, if we could recommend particular AI tools or kind of generative AI tools. We can't. We don't regulate lawtech providers or those particular AI tools. So whilst we can't recommend particular suppliers, again, we can point you to the resources on our website, and we can point you to our team in terms of telling you these are the kinds of things that you should be thinking about when it comes to procuring tech and using AI. And then the third challenge and kind of question that we get a lot, particularly for small firms, is around cost and resource. So having even the in-house skills or the time to look at what's available on the market and navigating the variable cost of some of these tools when the cost isn't immediately obvious. And again, we run events every year. We run 2 SRA Innovate events, very much targeted at small firms, to help kind of bring the community together to have those types of conversations. Because whilst we recognise that we can't give those sort of recommendations, we recognise that you talking to your peers is valuable in that respect. So I would say those are kind of 3 of the challenges that we very commonly hear from a regulatory point of view.
It's interesting that in just a few minutes we've talked about safety a lot, we've talked about risk quite a lot. We'll come on a bit later and talk about costs and small firms versus large firms, but I'd quite like to focus on the risk and safety, and perhaps ask Tony first. So what do firms need to know to use AI safely, and particularly managing those risks around data protection that Ashlyn's touched on, but also compliance with regulation?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the first thing is simple, and it will be something that everyone in this room is very familiar with, and that is get a policy in place. Get an AI policy in place. It's very easy to put in place. It's incredibly easy to draft. You can actually ask AI to draft an AI policy. But do it. And in that, you can either prohibit the use of external publicly available platforms, or you can permit the use of external platforms, because if you prohibit it, people might use it anyway. But if you're going to permit it, then put some guardrails around it. People can't register using their firm email address, so there's no association between the firm and the platform. Obviously, prohibit putting client or firm confidential information into the public platform. Another guardrail to build into your policy, obviously, is absolutely no use for anything that requires legal understanding or knowledge. So no legal research, no legal drafting, no legal analysis. Always, always, always check the output. The human has to check the output. These things hallucinate. They're getting better, but they're still hallucinating. Another aspect, actually, is one that we only really picked up on relatively recently, is rules around transcriptions. So we lawyers, we live our existences in Word, in Outlook, and increasingly now in Teams as well. And in Teams, there's a little button. You might have pressed it, you might not, but it's there. And it's really easy for anybody to record or transcribe a meeting on Teams. And that's dangerous. That's dangerous if it isn't regulated, because A, the record, unfortunately, hallucinates. And it can put on record, if you use it as the record, it can put on something that simply wasn't said. And secondly, of course, there can be breaches of data protection rights as a result of transcription. So don't ban it. It can be very useful, but put guardrails around it. And also mandatory training on the policy. Absolutely essential. And in fact, the EU AI Act, which is going to have a lot of extraterritorial impact. So anybody that does anything in Europe or has an office in Europe is going to have to be doing mandatory training on AI and its safe use by the 25th of February, I think, next year. So policy, really easy to do. Mandatory training, really easy to do. But that's half the story, because it's not all about sticks. And the fact is that AI is incredibly powerful. It's incredibly useful. It will increase efficiency. It will reduce time. It will increase accuracy as well. And it is going to become as predominant as email and internet became a generation ago. So lean into it, run towards it, make it safe with the policy, but equally give your people a safe platform to play in. And here's a tip, and I didn't know this until relatively recently, but any of you that already have a Microsoft Office 365 account, if it's a particular type of account, then you get, free of charge from Microsoft, you get a completely safe, walled garden AI platform. They call it Copilot. It's not the full fat Copilot that can do everything, but it's a safe walled garden. All the data stays within your Microsoft environment. And if you've got, and I've got the detail, I've got my IT team to tell the details, so you can go back and ask your IT teams if you've got it. If you've got, where are we? If you have got a business standard license, a business premium license, an E3, an E5, an A3 or an A5 license, then you are entitled to switch on that completely safe walled garden. That gives your people a safe playground in which to use AI. Safe in the sense that the data doesn't go outside. Not safe, of course, in that if they use the results and don't check the output, it's still highly dangerous.
Get your policy written first. Paul, anything to add on that?
Echoing the things that Tony said, the policy is always important, and that's something we would obviously be driving home, but it's what you do with the policy when you've written it, and that's the same across the board with all the aspects of risk that we have within a regulated environment. Mm-hmm. The training is incredibly important. Your data impact assessment in relation to whether you can actually utilise the product at all, it's incredibly difficult to track where the data is transferred and where it's kept and where it's housed. So actually the really simple stuff, and I think for small, large, medium firms, it is actually take it back to basics, do the same things that you would do in respect of any other risk that you flag within your practice. It's incredibly exciting, and it's potentially hugely valuable to any size of firm. And even more so than other technology, it's accessible. You can achieve success in this area quite easily, as long as you follow those guardrails and as long as you're really sensible about the way you do it. But actually give your teams safe places to play with it. And just then make sure that when it is being utilised, the things that everybody else has said, you are monitoring and you're maintaining that risk environment and the protection for the people within your organisations.
Thank you. I said I'd come back a bit to cost, and often, and I've heard this at our events before, Aisling, and I'm sure you have, that people saying that AI is really for large firms. They've got the budget, they've got the time, they've got the skill set. So if the small and medium firms have limited time, knowledge and budget, how should they go about understanding what's the minimum that they should be thinking about and what are the benefits to them? And where can they start? Perhaps for any of you who want to dive in with this. But yeah, is it the preserve of large firms, or are there great benefits for small firms?
No. Is the answer to the question. It's absolutely. This is probably the most exciting part of tech that we've had that isn't the preserve of those with deeper pockets. I think this is available. We've said already there's a risk piece, there's a knowledge piece, there's an understanding piece to it. But actually it's a buyer's market. There are a plethora of products out there, and actually some very, very straightforward, simple things that you probably don't even contemplate. CRM systems like HubSpot and that type of product. Armalytics utilise it already. It's already probably within your firm in a format, and it's just about identifying that and utilising it to the best that you can. Don't sign up for long-term contracts at this moment in time. It is moving so fast. You can try it for as long as you want. People will want you to buy it, or at least put your name behind it that you're utilising it. Take the position of strength, irrespective of the size of your organisation, I think is the drive from me.
It's a buyer's market.
100%.
Try before you buy, and 12 months is a long time in this world. Okay. So where to start, Tony?
Well, as I've said, putting a policy, training, and a play pit in place for your people is a pretty good start. Exactly as Paul said, it is a buyer's market. You know, I'm sure you are all approached by tech suppliers every week, and the thing is, you have to trial this stuff. Therefore, you have to be selective in what you look at, because to trial something properly takes a few weeks and it takes some resource. So you can't trial everything. You have to be very selective. And also, it's the wrong way round if a supplier knocks on your door and tells you what their tech can do, and then you start to think about how you might apply it. That's completely the wrong way round. Think about the needs you've got in your firm. Think about the processes you've got in your firm and how they might be better met and improved with technology, and then you go out and look for the supplier who's got that technology. That's how it should be. That's how it should be happening. And I completely agree with the contract duration. We don't sign anything more than 12 months now. A few years ago, you might sign a 3-year contract because you get a better annual cost. But the simple fact is, in a year's time, there's probably going to be another supplier that can do the same thing better, faster, and possibly cheaper. So don't sign up for more than a year.
The other thing that's often said, particularly I think just generally in the public, when AI first started, you know, when ChatGPT came out, however many months ago now, was, you know, this is going to be the end of jobs, this is going to be the end of you know, law firms training, you know, solicitors and so on. So any thoughts on what it means for the law firm of the future and what it means for jobs?
Well, absolutely. We've been using AI in some form or another now for about 7 years. And the majority of people in our firm are now using AI in some form. And in all that time, we haven't identified a single role out of 1,500 people. We haven't identified a single role that can be replaced by AI. We've found many roles that can be more effective when a person uses AI, and that's what it's about. It's about people and tech, not people or tech. Technology isn't going to replace the legal profession, but lawyers who use technology certainly will replace lawyers who don't. In terms of the threat to jobs, what I think might happen is that we might get to a point where we replace fewer people who leave in any event through natural attrition. That might happen because efficiency is increasing. As we grow as a firm, we might take on fewer new people as a proportion of the growth because people are becoming more efficient. But I see no signs at all that AI is going to lead to job losses, and of course there will be completely new roles created because AI requires new disciplines that frankly we haven't as law firms been recruiting for or training historically. So I don't see it as a threat at all. I see it as a great opportunity.
Great.
I think it's a great opportunity of levelling up the playing field as well, because in truth, I suspect the larger firms are less agile, and actually they probably struggle to manage its implementation across the board, whereas a smaller organisation actually can not only become better at what they're delivering and delivering it in the way that the consumer wants. I think to your point, all of our customers are looking at AI and utilising it, and they're wanting a different marketplace. Actually, the agility in a smaller organisation and the skill sets that are available and that this can help and support are huge. And therefore it is the opportunity where you can compete, perhaps more so in this instance than you have been able to with other technologies that have been launched.
Yeah, I think I would just add from a consumer point of view, one thing that my team does is we do research to understand, kind of consumer behaviour, what their attitudes, perceptions, and kind of use of tech is. And we know from work that we've done previously, they don't want lawyers to be replaced by robots. They don't want to lose that human touch. And there are circumstances where they would very much prefer to have that human contact and to have that in-person lawyer. So I think even from a consumer's point of view, the drive for replacing lawyers with robots isn't there either.
And perhaps just to say, we didn't emphasise it, I don't think strongly enough, that actually the information that is within an AI environment primarily is data, and primarily can be utilised as data output, but actually does not give you accurate answers to legal questions.
Yeah.
Welcome back, everyone. So you'll see I've been joined by our expert panel from the day. I did promise you one tweak. So joining us today instead of Paul is Angela Hesketh. So Angela is the head of UK market development for PEXA, so also from PEXA. She's a dual qualified conveyancer with an extensive understanding of the challenges with residential property law and legal practice. Thank you for joining us, Angela. And of course, Tony and Aisling, welcome back and thanks for joining us. So just a reminder for everyone, please do remember to submit your questions. We've got a good number of questions, but always room to squeeze a few more in. So perhaps I'll start with a question, maybe for Tony and Angela. So just some top do's and don'ts to law firms, maybe just a few quick sort of do's and don'ts when it comes to using tech and of course AI in particular.
Do you want to go, Tony?
Oh, absolutely. Hello, everyone. Okay, well, some do's. Do try before you buy. It's amazing how many tech solutions are out there, how many different suppliers, but it's equally amazing how few actually do what it says on the tin, or even if it does what it says on the tin, is it really useful to you? So always try before you buy. As was also stressed in the video, don't enter into long-term contracts. This technology it's doubling in power every 6 months, and there are new suppliers coming on the market all the time. So maximum contract length to sign up these days, 12 months, I would recommend. A bit more, always put your people above technology. It's not about tech or people, it's tech and people. Tech is merely a tool for your people to use. So never regard any technology, don't regard technology as the answer to any problem. It's simply how your people can better respond to a client need. And I guess I'd also, just a couple of do's. If you're a leader of a law firm watching this, do lead. Do take responsibility to lead your firm towards AI, because it is the future. But also, don't do everything yourself. So if you've got juniors in your firm who actually are more adept and up to speed with what AI can do, then bring them into the tent and give them a role to develop your firm in relation to AI. Seniors lead, but seniors don't have to do everything.
That's great. Thanks, Tony. Yeah, embrace those enthusiasts. I'm sure that's right. Angela, over to you. Do's and don'ts.
Okay, thank you. I mean, to reflect what Tony was saying, really. I mean, for me, it's do embrace it. Do make sure that you have a level of understanding of what AI is. I would suggest speaking to your trusted people, the trusted suppliers that you deal with already, because I would guarantee that people like your case management suppliers and the various other suppliers, whether that's your identity supplier or anything of that sort, will be dealing with AI themselves. They will have a level of knowledge around that, and they're in a really good place if they're working with you already to talk to you about what they're doing. It also helps you to understand that as well. And your people are key to this. The majority or certainly a large proportion of them will already be using AI in their lives in some form or other. Talk to them, get them involved, make sure that you feel comfortable about where they are, because that's going to be key in relation to your risk policies and how you're going to deal with that as well. There needs to be an open conversation, but there also needs to be a very open dialogue about what the do's and don'ts around their behaviour will need to be going forward, to try and encourage the best out of it, not terrify everybody, but also ensure that you've got the checks and balances in place as well.
Thanks, Angela. And perhaps, Aisling, to bring you in now, given that AI is a cross-cutting issue for all regulators, how does the SRA work with others to support the adoption of AI?
So I suppose that I would draw out two ways that we work with others. We do work with other partners and other organisations on specific projects. So, for example, at the minute we have a project that's funded by government through the Regulators Pioneer Fund, and we're doing that in collaboration with the Access to Justice Foundation and with the Law Society, and it's looking at online dispute resolution tools and how we can kind of help spur the adoption and uptake of those types of tools in the market, and that includes some AI type tools in the market as well. So we work with others on specific projects. The other way that we engage more generally is through kind of forums and groups that we sit on. So we engage with other legal regulators through forums such as the Regulatory Response Unit. That's where we can answer queries that come from law tech companies and those looking to kind of introduce AI tools into the market, and who might have a specific query for a regulator, or who might just want to know more about how legal services regulation operates. And then more broadly, beyond legal service regulators, we sit on working groups such as an Information Commission Officers AI working group, and that's a really useful forum where we as a regulator can learn how other sectors are helping support the responsible adoption of AI, and kind of learn from how other regulators themselves are learning and using AI. So those are kind of two things I would draw out in terms of how we're working with others to spur the responsible use of AI.
Great, thanks. And obviously we at the SRA covers England and Wales. So are you seeing any regional differences across the areas? Any areas that are further ahead in terms of use of tech, or just other differences? Aisling, if I can.
Yeah, I would say in terms of England and Wales, we definitely see some regions that have really great kind of law tech hubs or great kind of law tech initiatives, where kind of people come together, discuss the challenges, and really kind of look to spur the adoption and kind of use of tech locally within that region. And we've engaged kind of with various forums in that regard. In terms of other jurisdictions where we looked at, I think kind of most countries are very much looking at kind of the EU AI Act and what's that bringing, both from a regulatory point of view, but from kind of a use of AI point of view. So that's kind of a jurisdiction that we all have our eye on. But I would say the engagements that I have with other kind of regulatory counterparts from other jurisdictions is that everyone is, kind of looking at how they can support the responsible use within kind of existing regulatory remits. So that's kind of some examples I would draw out. But I don't know if Angela and Tony, if you have any other kind of good examples you'd want to highlight.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say you do tend to have specific hubs. You tend to find that there'll be groups that will work together in particular areas for not necessarily the reasons other than they have a good collaboration and they can use that knowledge base and share it. And I think that's becoming really, really important to have that security of being able to share knowledge and being able to work together. So I see it in certain hubs. So for example, in Leeds, where we're based and our head office is based, there's a particular hub there that seems to have come together, but we see that in various different areas of the country. And I think there's a lot to be said whether you group that around the local law firms that naturally work together, or whether that is an area where you have a particular knowledge base, or it's a group that, for example, use the same case management system or something of that sort. There are natural places where you can find a group that has a common interest and enables them then to really grow on that tech and look at how they can put that across their wider business, really.
Thanks. And Tony, have you seen anything sort of regionally or indeed in other jurisdictions?
Yeah, I mean, certainly all the major UK cities have legal tech hubs, and I think it's a really healthy thing, as Angela says, because they can function as safe spaces for peers to have very open discussions. Because let's face it, this is new to all of us, and it's still very much in its infancy. And those that have already ventured into AI, we're only a little way ahead of everybody else. And I have always found it really not just functional, but cathartic and useful to join in a discussion with peers, with other law firms, and just for a minute, just put our competitive natures aside and just share thoughts. And I've been to several roundtables like that, and I've come. I think everybody that's been to them has come away, thinking that was really useful. Not least of all because I think a lot of us lawyers, we don't really know where we sit on the curve. We don't know whether we're behind the curve, on it, ahead of it, and sometimes you can just get a bit of reassurance and confidence from speaking to your peers. So, like Angela, I think that get involved in a regional hub if you've got the opportunity.
Thanks, Tony. That makes me think of our SRA Innovate events, which we run a couple of times a year, and we move around the country. And it is that sort of peer learning and the quality of the conversations in the breaks and things. You can really see people getting a lot from that. So yeah, I would endorse that. So Angela, PEXA is obviously an Australian firm. So what brought you to the UK, and what differences do you see? Tell us a bit about Australia as well.
Okay, well, what I'd say firstly is AI didn't bring PEXA to the UK, but it's an inevitable part of anyone's journey, really. I mean, the main reason for PEXA being in the UK is that we use the same land registry system. But again, all of these things are going to AI is such an integral part, and the advantage of having that cross-border, cross-jurisdiction experience, I suppose, is the fact that you can feed in to both of those things to see what the journey is. But the reality of it is, in the same way as we're talking about different firms being at different levels, from what Tony was saying, different jurisdictions are in the same sort of situation. Again, you can get comfort from that knowledge sharing across that to see what is happening in those different jurisdictions. But no one is necessarily way ahead of anybody else. This is an evolving real-time journey that we're all on, and I think it is about taking that at a reasonable pace, not ignoring it, making sure that you've got all of your risk, or as much as you can, covered, making sure that you are aware of things that are going on, get involved in those local hubs, as we've talked about, and also keep your mind open to what is happening in the other jurisdictions. For us, as a company that has an Australian side and a UK side, obviously we're in a position where we can knowledge share and bring that forward. But I think the world is becoming a smaller and smaller place, isn't it? And through AI and everything else, it just brings that more to the fore. And we can learn from other jurisdictions, and in turn we can also educate other jurisdictions as well. But it's a matter of taking the best from that and understanding that AI is part of everybody's journey at the moment and everybody's evolution, really.
Absolutely. We're all learning this, aren't we? Okay, so we've had a question come in. How do we prevent staff from using AI to carry out their tasks without us knowing, considering the need to be transparent to our clients? Tony, it starts with our policy, I suspect, but can I hand over to you for that one?
Yeah, of course. It is a real risk, like we said in the video, even if you don't know that your people are using public platforms, they probably are, because public platforms are so available. And the very first thing you've got to do is run towards that potential risk, run towards it, and put in place policies and guardrails. So if people are going to be using public platforms, then tell them on what basis they can and can't use those platforms and what they must not put into those public platforms. So that's point number one. I think the other thing, and again, I mentioned this in the video, try and put in a walled garden platform as soon as you can, because that makes all the difference. Because once you've put a safe platform that doesn't allow data to escape to the ether, you've created a safe playground for your people. They don't need then to go to public platforms because they've got your safe platform. And as I mentioned in the video, the easiest way for most law firms, because most of us subscribe to a Microsoft, and I'm not on commission with Microsoft, by the way. Other walled garden platforms are available, but Microsoft make one available free of charge if you've got one of those particular enterprise licenses that I mentioned in the video. So for me, it is all about policy guidelines and trying to get a walled garden in place.
Thanks. And we've had a question on Copilot, which is the example you gave. So how are people using the Office 365 Copilot to test the technology? So perhaps some examples of how they can use this best.
Shall I?
Yeah, sorry,
again
Tony.
with that?
I must say, yes, Tony, I know who I'm looking at.
So as well as the free of charge Copilot that Microsoft offer, and it's very confusing because they call several of their products Copilot, they also have another more powerful product called Microsoft 365 Copilot. And the reason that is more powerful than the free of charge version is two things fundamentally. First, it sits natively in all of the Microsoft 365 apps. So it's there as a button in Word, it's there as a button in Outlook, it's there as a button in Teams. And we lawyers, we live in Outlook and Word and increasingly now Teams. So it's more powerful in that respect. But secondly, the powerful version of Copilot has access. It can read all the data that sits in your firm's Microsoft account, which is hugely powerful. Obviously, if you want to find documents or you want to find emails or you want to compare documents, or you want to you want to find a policy, for example. So those are the two superpowers, if you like, that full fat Copilot has got compared to the free of charge. In terms of the power, testing the power of Copilot, it's extraordinary what it can do. I mean, it's extraordinary what any AI platform can do. We are still not testing Copilot for legal tasks. We're looking at other technology for legal tasks. It's too unsafe at the moment, but for anything that doesn't involve legal work, so drafting policies, designing training sessions and conferences, drafting content for press releases, people completing their internal annual reviews, for example. You can go into Copilot and say, well, can you scour all my emails and see, give me the 10 things I did in the last year that were notable. And it helps you with your annual review. So hugely powerful, very safe. It's $30 per user per month. So it can add up if you've got a lot of users, but I understand there's no minimum number of licenses. So if you haven't got many users, it's a really inexpensive way to get access to the most powerful version of Copilot.
Thanks, Tony. So we've had a question come in. What's the panel's thoughts on document automation? Does it actually save time if we need to check every line? Perhaps I'll start with Angela and then on to Tony on this one. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is similar to when we had the provisions in relation to things like Big Hand and digital dictation and all of those kind of things, wasn't it? At first, you're there having to train it, make sure everything is okay, go through everything, and I think there is an innate fear for us as lawyers as well that there is going to be something in there that is wrong, and we do have to be incredibly careful about that. So it depends what level of automation you're talking about, though, really, on this. I use various different AI platforms for just a lot of the things that Tony's just mentioned in relation to training, in relation to drafting, various things that I'm involved in. But you're using it with knowledge, so you're in a position to be able to check that and ensure that that's valid and be aware of all of those concerns about it. Now, automation of documents on a very basic level, providing you can see that it is doing exactly what it's been asked and it's not being asked to think effectively, what it's doing is just doing a task specifically that you've asked it to do, and you can check that, then fantastic, it's giving you time back all the way through. It's when you start to use it to interpret and advise, that's where the red flags start to come up, and that's when you have to be a lot more cautious. Automation is more about making sure that things happen in a certain route and along a certain route. The decision trees for that are a lot more straightforward potentially than when we're talking about the more involved advice, drafting, all of those kind of things, all of which are, to Tony's point earlier, they're too unsafe. They're not in a position. You have to have a very close look on that. But even then, you know, if you've got people who have the knowledge base and can use this as a support, the amount of additional work and knowledge that they can get themselves, and to be honest, the job satisfaction that you can get geared against when you're not using anything at all and you're having to trawl through everything, it can be very, very powerful. But do it cautiously. Understand what it is you are trying to automate. Understand what it is that you're asking that AI or technology to do, and how many things could potentially go wrong in that. A lot of the things, it is literally do this next. Well, if you know that do this next is going to work every time, then there isn't a concern, and actually it's taking a lot of time back for you. But if there's a decision within that and it could go in a number of different ways, that's when it starts to become a lot more complicated and a lot more risk associated with it as well.
Great, thanks. Tony, did you have anything to add on that, or shall I just quickly and then I'll move on? They're flooding in now, the questions. So.
Oh, well, do please move on. I think, though, just on document automation, as Angela says, let's be clear on what we mean by document automation. If we're talking about the automation of the production of documents from a template, that isn't AI. It's well-established technology. It's been with us for 15 years. We use it all the time. It's hugely reliable, and it saves a lot of time, which actually means also, if in your firm you haven't got that document automation, do that before you look at AI. I mean, that you know, it's not all about the shiny new stuff. Let's not forget the old technologies that try. But if by document automation you mean the AI analysis of legal documentation, that's a completely different subject, which we could talk all day about.
Lovely, thank you. So there's a question here. Would you recommend a sole practitioner or small firms with less than 12 fee earners to use AI, and for what reasons? So I'm sensing maybe a little bit of reluctance. So I'm sure the answer is going to be yes. Maybe Tony and then Angela.
Sure. Well, when email and the internet was introduced, if you had 12 people in your firm, would you tell them not to use those? AI is of exactly the same significance and magnitude. It is the future. And whether we like it or not, it is going to be part of pretty much every one of our legal workflows going forwards. So is it worth it? Yes, absolutely. Like I've said before, lean in. If you're not already leaning in, lean in as quickly as possible. And actually, with 12 people in your law firm, it's far easier to manage and control how you're leaning in than when you've got 1,500 people in your law firm, where you've got to exercise a lot of control.
Yep, no, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. Angela?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say very similar to what Tony's just said, but in my view, this is where it becomes incredibly valuable. When you've got a small to medium-sized law firm, when you've got a small number of people who you can have very clear and open conversations with, then actually the benefit of AI for you is huge, and the advantages for you and how you could elevate your practice is it starts to really change the dial in so many ways, because actually you can work in a lot more agile way, you can change a lot more quickly, you can adopt a lot more things with all those, all of those checks and balances in place, as we've talked about before. But you can do that so much more easily and guide your people when you're in that contained environment, rather than when you're in a huge trawler type environment where you've got to try and bring everyone along with you and make sure they're all complying with that, which can feel like the impossible task. So I think this is a real positive for the small law firm.
Excellent. Thank you, Angela. So hopefully we've convinced whoever asked that question on that one. So Aisling, I haven't forgotten you. I've got a couple of questions now that have come in about the SRA and the SRA's role. So the first one is the SRA planning to issue any further guidance on how firms should be risk assessing their use of Gen AI, and what firms should be telling clients about the products that will help them improve operational efficiency? So guidance on use of AI and what they tell the clients.
So we do have a business plan commitment on enhancing our approach to AI. So my team at the minute are looking at exactly that. So looking at exactly in terms of use of AI and generative AI in particular, what are the kind of common questions that we get, and how is it that we as a regulator can help our regulated community kind of use that technology responsibly and safely. So we're looking at how we best do that. It might be through guidance, but we also kind of are looking at other vehicles and means of kind of getting those messages across to our community. So that's something our team is doing. I would also say that there are other useful resources available to law firms right now, both on our website. So we do have some stuff that isn't guidance, but we do, for example, have a risk outlook report on AI that's got really useful tips in there for those firms who are thinking about using AI and they're just not sure kind of where to start. So I'd say have a look at that and have a look at our website generally. And then there are other organizations such as the Law Society who have kind of a useful hub of resources when it comes to AI. So definitely lots out there right now, but certainly kind of more to come from us at the SRA.
Lovely, thanks, Aisling. And I agree. I would suggest the risk outlook is a good starting point. Another question: do we have any specimen policies on AI and law tech? We've talked quite a lot about the need for a policy. Where could people get some help with that, other than asking AI, which Tony did, I know, mention? Aisling, do we have any examples?
So we don't have any example policies, I suppose, in terms of kind of on our website. We do have a useful webpage that talks about use of tech and kind of compliance tips. So I would say kind of have a look at that. It isn't an example of an AI policy document per se, but it certainly kind of gives you some useful content to think about.
Okay, thank you. How are we doing for time? I think I'll do a couple more questions then, I think. So isn't Bespoke AI better suited to our profession rather than third-party services? And should the focus be on encouraging Bespoke AI to suit all sized firms? Who'd like to take that first?
Well, I'm very
Tony.
happy to
Yeah, thank you, Tony.
observe on it. for legal work, the application of AI for legal work, and often there's a lot of jargon in the industry, and I don't like jargon because it tends to make it all feel less accessible than more. But in the industry, it's called legally tuned AI. But what that really means, it's very similar to all generative AI platforms, but it's being pointed very much at a confined and reliable database or set of rules that lawyers have put together to then guide the AI in a particular legal task. And I completely agree with the questioner, if I'm inferring correctly what I think the questioner's attitude was, that absolutely you do not just take a Copilot or a Google Gemini or a Claude AI public platform, put a draft contract into it and then ask it what's wrong with that contract. You absolutely do not do that. But what you could do is take any one of those platforms, put it in a walled garden, create a very detailed rule book, and then say, right, compare this rule book against that document. And then you'd be surprised at how good the response can be. So I think it's publicly developed platforms, because no law firms individually can develop these platforms. It makes no financial sense. Publicly developed platforms, but then law firms develop the rule books to point the AI towards, to make sure that you're getting sensible responses when you apply it in legal tasks.
That's great. Thanks, Tony. I'm actually going to jump to my final question because I'm conscious of the time, and I think this is a nice one to end on, which is, how will the sector have changed in 3 years' time? And that's to everyone. Nice, relatively quick response to each of you on that. So what will we see in 3 years? I'll start with Angela, thanks.
Right. Okay. This is my wish for the coming 3 years. So let's see if I can manifest this, because apparently that's the new word. That's what we're all doing. For me, this is about elevating the profession. This is about having some real quality, useful tools that take us away from having to trawl through, recheck, do the work, duplicate work, repeat work all of the time. It's about bringing new people, a younger society, into our profession and making it attractive for them so that they want to join and they can actually add so much more value in that. And it's also about how we have a much more secure environment to work within as well, so we are not constantly being attacked in all ways. You know, if we can use this in a way that enables us to have a much better work-life balance, where we can get through that information, actually provide it to our clients in a way that maybe is more digestible to them and they feel comfortable with, and bring new good talent into the industry, then that to me is an absolute win. Let's if we can do that in the next 3 years, then fantastic. Let's go for it. That's what we need. We need a bit of energy into everything, rather than it feeling as if we're just completely wrapped up in the riskiest, most dreadful industry at times in relation to the attacks upon us and our client base. So that's where I want it to be in the next 3 years.
Oh, it's a lovely optimistic view. I love that. Okay, Tony and then Ashlyn, anything on where we'll be in 3 years' time?
Equally optimistic. Let's get humans using AI to do the heavy lifting, so that humans are then freed up, their time is freed up for them to apply their very human skills to give clients a better service than ever.
Lovely. Thank you, Tony. And Ashlyn?
I think for me, my hope would be that we have more kind of transparent and open access to legal services for consumers. I think there's a real potential here for AI to benefit and help the public and help consumers of legal services, and it can really kind of open things up for them. So that would be my hope for 3 years' time.
Lovely, thank you. So in the final minute, all that remains is for me to very much thank our panelists. Thank you, audience, and for your questions. Alongside the recording of this video, you will find links to a range of useful materials on this subject, so do please take a look. And as always, we'd really like your feedback on this session. So please click on the feedback link, and it really does help us improve what we do for you. So this session brings to an end the first day of our virtual conference, but as you know, it's running all week. So do please take a look at our website and sign up for some other sessions. Otherwise, as I say, take a look at our website for some recordings of this session and some other useful resources. Thanks very much and have a good day. Thank you.